Okay. You have to switch off your sound.
Okay. I think now should be fine, right?
Yeah, should. Let's check if there's. Can you hear us? Okay, nice.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming and listening to my presentation or seminar. Yeah, sorry for these little hiccups. I'm terrible with the tech things, but yeah. So yeah, I think I will just share my ongoing PhD work. Yeah, so just maybe to clarify where I'm at and where I'm coming from. I'm in my second year of the PhD at the Scuola Normale in Florence and part of the Center for Social Movement Studies there. And yeah, so I'm in the second year, so I haven't done the main parts of the field work yet, so it might be a bit yeah, a lot of like work in progress and still like some theories that I'm trying to organize at the moment. But yeah, in the second part, I'm also gonna try to share some more examples and yeah, to make it maybe a bit more interesting. So basically, my project is looking at emotions and affective bonds within internationalist and ecofeminist movements, and how these bonds and emotions relate to kind of a new form of intersectional and prefigurative practice of movement building. And so in that way, I'm looking how we can move from an isolated narrative of identities towards a political struggle, while taking account the complexities of all the systems of oppression. And basically here, emotions between the different actors build also the groundwork for exploring the larger process of movement building. So yeah, this is kind of where I started at the beginning of my PhD. I was, well, my first proposal actually was more kind of abstract, and I was for a while interested in like solidarity and alliance building and so on. And first I actually wanted to look more at the climate justice movement. But then with everything that was going on, like later on, I realized that what I'm actually more interested in, or what's kind of at the core of all of this, is the actual emotions of love and the bonds between activists that really drive these forms of solidarity. So that's how I changed my project, yeah, in the first month. And then also like seeing what was going on, yeah, after the 7th of October in 23, to see that internationalist feminist movements in Europe and everywhere were kind of the first ones also mobilizing the solidarity movements for Palestine. So we can see like an example in Berlin and another one in London by Sisters Uncut, who are really at the forefront of organizing yeah, these protests and really stressing the importance of these interconnected struggles and relating beyond physical and ideological borders. And what's also interesting here for me was that these more feminist movements, they put in the center of their practice this revolutionary love, this kind of more than romantic feeling of relation that's based on a common vision for liberation. And this I later describe also as an effective internationalism that's based also on collective healing and relating, that sees the rootedness of the political struggle and at the same time the larger perspective of a global resistance. So basically also the aim of the thesis is to to drive a deeper understanding of these interconnected emotions. So not just love and connection, but also how anger and frustration and so on are transformative forces against systemic violence and capitalist alienation. So some of my research questions, but they are also changing all the time. But yeah, so just like what I'm most interested in. So yeah, how revolutionary love can kind of counteract these conditions of capitalism and systemic violence, and how these ties influence the capacity to sustain political engagement and imagine and build movements. And just also in general, how this concept of love shapes the practices of these movements. And yeah, the larger one, how we can move away from this focus on identity to an intersectionality of struggles. And so these are some pictures from the solidarity protests for Palestine in Berlin. And here we could really see that in these protests, these narratives of love were really strong. Also, like historically in the Palestinian movement, also through poetry and so on, love has a big significance. But then, as it was in the feminist movement, these ties and mutual support and so on have been very important. And maybe because also the violence these protests have been facing have been getting stronger and stronger. So the love has been really a focus point here. And so this is just like the observations I've been making. So the first, it's a quote by the Palestinian visual artist Arish Kaut, resistance is the deepest form of love. So yes, I'm looking at how these emotions are experienced as part of collective action, but also as during movement building and like assemblies and so on, and the more quiet parts of movement building, how they build and renew the capacity to face, survive, and resist systemic violence, and also how this potential for liberation can coexist with the possibility of encountering pain, anger, and frustration in precarious lives. And I really want to also embed this, all of this in a materialistic critique, to realize that capitalism creates this constant feeling of lack, and that's why we have the need also for more relatedness. And in a way, therefore, pointing our attention to emotions is a radical act in itself, because it opens up our vulnerabilities that are under constant capture. For example, Rosemary Hennessy writes that love, in a way, responds to this systemic production of unmet needs under capitalism. So, yeah, emotions really point us to what's wrong with the system and what we want to change, and like, yeah, the future we want to live in. Some of the main kind of concepts I'm looking at, they're also still changing a lot. But basically, I think it's important to say that emotions in social movement studies also have a history, like since the 80s and so on. For example, Pauletta and James Jasper, they've been writing a lot about how emotions also inspire collective action and how they create a collective identity of activists. And so, yeah, in my project, I also go a bit beyond this, looking at kind of the core of what is revolutionary love. For example, I was inspired by the writings or practices of the Bolshevik revolutionary Alexander Kollontai, who also observed that love transcends these individual emotions, asserting its significance as a deeply social and political force. So love is not just a private affair between two people, but in her view, it harbors the unifying aspect that holds value for the collective. She called this the winged arrows. Yeah, that is different than the bourgeois individualistic idea of love, the unwinged arrows. And of course, in many movements, also mostly outside of our Western focus, already exists a lot of example of this revolutionary love. One very important concept is the Kurdish concept Tevalti. It's by the woman Guriyas in Kurdistan. They describe this kind of as an unbreakable comradeship between members of a movement. And it's a profound commitment to each other that involves radical care, while at the same time challenging the patriarchal and individualistic mentalities. So the idea is kind of like, through you, I see me, and together we see the world. So nothing is isolated. These three realms are always interconnected. So this view really goes beyond the kind of neoliberal ideas of like love is love or make love not war kind of, because as we could see like in by protests or so on, or like even in Israel, like many of these actors have been trying to use narratives of love and use like pinkwashing to use it, but this really goes against this revolutionary sense of love. So it's also important to call out when it's being misused like that. And I'm also looking at the complexities of love, because of course it's often you cannot separate this revolutionary love from other feelings or bonds, also romantic sexual feelings and friendship. These lines are really blurry. So I'm also interested how all these bonds interconnect. And of course, many of you know that, for example, Bell Hooks has been writing about this a lot. Also, the political value of love. She writes, because we no longer are playing by the safe rules of the status quo, rules that we obey, that if we obey, guarantee us a specific outcome. Love moves us to a new ground of being. This movement is what most people fear. And also, Stefania Barker even has been writing lately about revolutionary love. I talked to her the other day, and she also wrote, what we really need right now is revolutionary love in the sense of caring for each other across movements, across struggles, a love that seeks the fulfillment of each other's needs. So basically to round up this first concept is that love within social movement leads us to a more relational understanding of collective survival. So moving beyond the more theoretical language of solidarity towards effective equality and this coordinated action will be also the challenge to create an internationalist feminist movement. Then the kind of second theoretical ambition or path that I have in my project that came a bit later on is basically to link emotions to prefiguration. There's been so basically to see that it's crucial to understand how social movements not only envision but actually actively construct the future they desire. There's been some important work on this by Gravante and Poma. They are Italian researchers in Mexico. So basically they write that as activists link social change to prefigurative actions in everyday life, they shape social relations based on values like respect for nature, love, trust, friendship, companionship in the lived experience at a local level. So this also relates to the conviction that actually whenever we talk about solidarity, we always describe a utopia already. So when we talk about these relations, it's really connected to utopian visions. So here, prefiguration is not only about taking power through mass mobilization, but also about making power from creating the internal structures that within the movements that already embody the desired future. So Lin et al. Write here that prefiguration is ingrained in the everyday, as it's not something that we create to call in a future without or nostalgically before oppression and violence, but rather in spite of it. So basically reclaiming these radical feelings means not only fighting indifference, but already engaging in these prefigurative politics of relatability. And love and friendship here act as survival strategies, prefigurative experiences, and forms of resistance. And another example, another example is that these relations show us different conceptions beyond the family or the bourgeois ideas of love and romance. So they're pointing us to how different social relations can exist also. Because a comrade is a companion in a common fight, we can feel responsibility in our comradeship without comparing it to a familiar relation. So it really urges us to reflect, like, who do we feel connected to and who do we feel this responsibility towards beyond our taken for granted ideas of family and so on. And then the last kind of theoretical block is around internationalism. I had a bit of struggle with this concept also before, but how I approach it now is to look at it in an effective sense. So I have been inspired a bit also by Sandro Mesatra's conceptualization of this. He's been writing recently how we should rethink internationalism, how we to link the rootedness of political action with this larger desire and the interest to build the material conditions of a new internationalism. So to look at how this concept looks like in the current conjuncture we are in. So yeah, I look at it through this affective lens, how we can feel each other's pain and feel this interconnectedness. Maybe it's a bit difficult to understand on the theoretical plane only, but maybe to give an example, one case I've been looking at, it's a comrade who's been active in Berlin in the solidarity movements there, and she's been persecuted and had to go to trial because she said from the river to the sea. And then basically in her speech she also highlights how, like, her being facing this violence in Berlin, how it connects to how she feels responsibility for the global liberation in Palestine and globally. So yeah, how do we really feel these connections? So yeah, it's about building a capacity to care. It's not, love is not something taken for granted. It's not something that's just there. It's a capacity as well. So basically, it's the conviction that only if we care about each other and our comrades and our struggles, we can begin to also care about the larger issues. And of course, there are a couple of issues in all of this. For example, when there are a lot of hierarchies of solidarity, there's also a book I've been reading recently about this. So, like, why do we connect to certain struggles more than to others, for example? And the other is, of course, around identity, still how identity should not be the endpoint of political organizing. So how can we be solidaristic without understanding each other completely? To move to what Angela Davis called this intersectionality of struggles. So basically, what does this no one is free until all of us is free can really mean in our struggles? Yeah, this is just no, it's not sharing anymore. Maybe I need to reshare it. It's not changing the slides anymore.
Maybe there was a problem with the internet connection.
Could be.
Or network quality. Yeah, it's not super important, the slides, but
Stop sharing and share it again. Try.
Oh, okay. Just a bit slow. Yeah, this was just the cover of the book by Valentin Poma I like. So yeah, there's this ongoing work there that's going on, and I'm very interested in what they do, and hopefully I can like maybe meet them there. Where was I? Yeah, so I've been wondering a bit how this connects to the political ecology perspective. And I want to, I mean, I had this in the beginning of my research and then kind of distance a bit from it, and I want to now maybe go get a bit back into it. So maybe you also have some suggestions here. But I also like have this belief, of course, that revolution has to come from this genuine sense of a belonging to the web of life, not just from fear and powerlessness. And also like realizing that the law in capitalistic views is constructed just for one species, and even within the species it hierarchizes. And how capitalism creates this division between the valueless, supposedly valueless, biophysical realm and an economic realm where value is produced by and for human beings only. And so I also want to move away from the purely anthropocentric view that always reproduces the hierarchies. And I've seen there's some work on emotional political ecology. Mostly, I mean, it's been coined by Farhana Sultana, but also other scholars are writing about it. It's mostly based on environmental protests, but I think it can also translate to the context I'm looking at. So yeah, I mean, I'm mostly looking at urban context, but also realizing how they are kind of the senses of belonging of the neighborhood or the changing conditions in these cities that are, of course, also changing under neoliberal development and so on, how this changes our ideas of belonging to each other in a neighborhood and a community. I read a bit just the last days, so it's not really connected yet, but I thought I'd just share by Marian Gonzalez Hidalgo. I don't know if you know her, but she writes about this as well, about how to be well, considering human subjectivity and agency as mediated by emotional communication between the human and the non-human that helps us to think of this being in common subjectivities. And she also writes about healing. I think, yeah, this is also important for my project, how we often fall back on these notions of well-being that are very ableist or binary. And well-being is always seen as this end goal. Rather, it's invested in cultivating relationships with the emotional and psychological selves that foster joy, tenderness, and liberation. So basically, how we can nourish the everyday life of movements with this shared feeling that things can change. Yeah, those are the most loose thoughts I had recently, and maybe we can come back to it. My method, I'm not going to talk about it much now, but is this ethnography. Yeah, mostly participant observation and interviews, and also visual production. So trying to experiment with, because I have some background in filmmaking, to use not just writing, but also visual methods with the movements. So as a method, and then also as an end product, sounds bad, but end result. But yeah. Just to share what I've been already been writing. So yeah, I have mostly been trying to write some articles to start writing, because it's quite difficult to start just writing the thesis. This was an article I published in December. Basically, I felt this need also with observing what was going on in Germany to to write about internationalism and also the problems of internationalism in this context, in the radical left movements in Germany. As we could see that Germany really had this failed response to the genocide in Gaza that led to this cultural turn. And it's shaped by the state's approach to national memory. I'm not going to get too much into it, but in the end, I also give some examples by the movements there. So the Alliance of Internationalist Feminists, for example, that have been organizing these solidarity protests, and they really have this understanding of how their histories and struggles for liberation are intertwined, and through their practices of solidarity, they also counteract this silencing and can maybe guide us towards a new understanding of internationalism or what it could look like. And then I've been writing this for the call that Joe also had from the last Decode conference on. I've been writing a bit about violence, also to see, not just physical violence, but also how, like, the different aspects of violence, also how it's normalized, and also, psychological violence and so on, that are all kind of effects by this imperialist capitalist system. And also here looking at how these anarchist practices based on prefiguration disrupt the status quo, but how we also need an understanding of emotions here to deconstruct this violence and to make it visible and to really prioritize bonds. And then another thing I've been writing was mostly kind of to start writing the methodological chapter to see how we can practice decolonial feminist approaches in neoliberal academia. This, is still kind of a struggle for me because, I'm in this system, and it can feel very frustrating to write about different approaches when you're still in the system. And it's just like some proposals I gave, this idea of epistemic disobedience that you can practice within to really act, to confront and resist the constraints, kind of as antidotes to the isolation we also feel as researchers and so on. But I'm not so happy with this. We'll see. So what I've been doing outside of the office, kind of. So mostly I've been having conversations with different friends and comrades and so on about this. And it's always interesting to see also how these ideas connect to what they're doing. Mostly what I found out that many people are really feeling right now a lot of feelings of political defeat and hopelessness, and actually many are feeling depressed as well. And sometimes getting organized and prioritizing these bonds can help them with these feelings as well. There's one quote by a friend: "I used to feel so overwhelmed by capitalism and patriarchy, but now I have the courage because I know the revolution will come." And but also really what I realized is that this love is very difficult and it cannot be taken for granted. Like, you might feel it in one context and then not in another. And what I also observed is when this feeling of comradeship becomes a romantic connection, like the complexities that happen then, and people still often look for some kind of security or romantic relationships as well, and we always fall back into the bourgeois image of love, even if we don't want to do it, but it happens. So I've been doing a bit of emotion diaries and self-ethnography, but I don't want to share this yet. But these pictures are from some workshops I've been doing. The first one, I almost forgot about it, but I did at the Decode conference in Zagreb. When was this? 22? So basically what we did, well, first we talked about revolution and love and the interconnections, and then we drew these love trees. Yeah, probably you cannot read it, but basically the roots are kind of the values and worldviews. So people wrote here, for example, autonomy, respect, equality, interdependency, and then it leads to to kind of the how this is growing. The democratic processes are the branches, and then the outcomes of it are like the fruits. So what we have creating space, liberating education, active listening, paying attention, and then the outcomes kind of well-being, revolution, pleasure, care, and so on. And then I've been doing this last year, this workshop. Then you can see in the other images, writing revolutionary love letters. So I kind of had this idea that it's often difficult to express these emotions, but if we have someone to express it to, someone that we've been thinking about, mostly a comrade in our movements that we want to tell them something, it's much easier to express these emotions. So it was quite a nice experience also with the participants to write these letters and also to see the unexpected results. So some people, one of them, for example, wrote a letter to their child because they felt right now that they wanted to tell them something, and other people still felt this block and they couldn't really write it, and they ended up writing an essay instead of a letter, and felt frustrated. Like these things also happen because it's very difficult to, because especially when we're in academia, we write more analytically to really reconnect to our emotions and write what we really feel. It's difficult also for me. And some other things that came up in this discussion, for example, was that someone said love is driving revolution, but at the same time, revolution is also driving love. So the belief that change is possible also keeps us connected. So just this idea of revolution, even if it's very utopian, is also a way to channel our emotions and our bonds. So revolution really becomes before political reason. But people also talked about rejection they felt in movements before and how they can build bridges. Someone said we have to share vulnerability in a society based on fear. And but someone also said, like, when we first hear love, it sounds very cheesy, but it's actually the opposite of cheesiness. It's just having a space to talk about it is really nice. And I wanted to share this. Also, I've been reading a lot, of course. The first one here, it's actually what inspired also the workshop, was it's in a book I read. It's a letter wrote by the collective Mujeres Voces en Resistencias. It's a migrant feminist collective in Valencia, and they wrote this this love letter to their comrade. Basically, it's very beautiful. This is just the last part, so I put it here. Should I read the translation? Maybe. Yeah. Okay. So it goes, thanks to you and the others, my voice feels safe to dance freely in open spaces where the private becomes political and my desire to burn everything becomes a transformative force because I'm no longer alone. A friendship is friendship that shelters us in our daily lives and protects us from a system that wants to break us and take away the love that keeps us on our feet. A friendship that transcends physical spaces, offering a warm home full of conversations where the past is narrated, the present is resisted, and the future is built. Dear friend, you are my resistance. And the other example I had is what recently someone sent to me. It's like a communique that's been shared by Feministas de Aviala, and it's also very long text. And basically, firstly, they have a very deep analysis of everything that's going wrong in the world right now, basically. And then they ended on this note that, so if they give us misery, let's sow rebellion. Resignation has no place in our hearts, comrades. We are not going to get used to seeing more and more hunger, more and more people living on the streets, more and more poverty, violence, and repression. Because, as Loanna Berkins taught us, the time for revolution is now, and the engine of change is love. Here, nobody lets go of anyone's hand. Here, nobody gives up. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. That's basically it. So if we want to have a discussion, I would be happy, of course. Mostly, as you saw, that yeah, my ideas on the political ecology perspective are still very unclear. So if you have any ideas how to kind of integrate this with the internationalism aspect, would be great, and like how to apply it to the urban contexts. Also, if you have any other ideas for other movements where you saw these ideas present, I would be happy, or any text it was. And if any one of you wants to share how Revolutionary Love connects to you, I would also be very happy to hear this. Yes, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for the presentation and doing this research. I have a very silly question, and I probably bothered you for some confidential. But for me, I will feel like I will identify so much with my informants and the people who study. How do you go? Because for me, it will be really hard. How do you go about separating yourself in that sense? To what extent do you let yourself being reconstructed by your influence?
It's a challenge, yeah. I mean, I try. Yeah, I mean, firstly, I believe that we cannot separate ourselves from the context we study ever. Like, I always try to take into account my position and how I feel, anyways. But you are right that it's been difficult because of like the first kind of conversations and I had were with people that I was organized with, not anymore so much, but also in the past. And of course, there are these issues. That's why I thought that doing the fieldwork now with a group that I'm not already involved with. Of course, there's already like I'm still solidaristic and there's many overlaps, but it might be easier not have this immediate connection to it. But yeah, I'm trying to take all these challenges in as well, writing about it.
But maybe also it's an asset, right? Because I mean, it's very hard for people to share such deep emotions with people that they don't trust. And so maybe rather than always seeing it as something that disturbs, actually it's also probably an asset for you that, yeah, like there is a connection, because it's, yeah, I mean, when do people in our society open so much about these types of emotions? Something that, I mean, I think that maybe I'm also just personally interested in is the aspect of rage and anger as an expression of love. And I wonder how that could show up in your research, because I think it's often, like in social movement studies and generally in society, like expressions of rage and anger often seen as irrational, or yeah, just something of like, yeah, like these are stupid protesters that use violence just for their own kind of benefit. And I wonder how either the framing of irrational rage, for example, in the Palestine protests that we see a lot, or the expression of rage in destruction of property or other expressions of rage could actually being reframed or analyzed in your research as something of, this is the other underlying emotions, and actually there might be expressions of solidarity and love in that, or there might not be. But yeah, I mean, that's just a personal interest, but I was thinking about it throughout your presentation, and it could be very nice.
Yeah, for sure. We should talk about it more. And I want to focus more about, as I said, the interconnections of these emotions too. Like rage can be an expression of love.
Mhm.
But also how, for example, the Palestine movement has been characterized or like written about as like the protesters are hateful also on just because but like this kind of narratives are very strong. So to show that this rage is also a form of love sometimes. And how we even have the capacity or build the capacities to feel in general, because we're often trying to because we're so alienated and like feel this indifference because the system tells us that everything is just how it is and we're not supposed to feel. So these emotions are important. We should talk about more. I think you know more about it than me.
More question, comment?
Yeah, question. So, talking about the political economic perspective that you want to approach, so you want to, as I understood, to connect the theoretical framework that you presented about revolutionary love with the political ecology. So, did you choose political ecology specifically for something, or you wanted to connect the environmental perspective with the revolutionary love?
I think the last part.
So, because I don't know much about political ecology, but I'm working with STR, Sustainability Transition Research, and I think that the concept of power can really connect like the part of like the how to have a revolution or a transition, and at the same time to care about the environment. So I can maybe search for a couple of papers that can be useful or something.
More comments?
This is not my topic, so I can be a bit clumsy. So I feel like saying sorry just in advance. No, it's as I was listening some of the people speaking of, fighting for freedom and also this thing of revolutionary love. I was thinking that these things can be also said or are probably being said, and these sentences are being pronounced right now in the far right. So
My question, you
sorry. Yeah, but probably there are many ways of saying the same thing, or I think there is a fertile ground here. So I have many questions, but I will choose one so that you can say the rest of them. Is there a difference between these two worlds, these two struggles, or whatever you are saying now is applicable to them as well?
No, it's a good point. I've been also thinking about it recently. Also, the concept of internationalism, for example. I mean, Zionism can be framed as internationalism too, in a way, or the narrative like we see right now with the rising fascism. I mean, how I see it, but I want to look at it more too, is how they use these frames of trying to create these ideas of belonging, but it's a different kind of ground. It's not actually seeing the persons or their needs and their desires, but more like using them for their political gains. But I think it's actually important to look at it more. Also, of course, in the current context, how these two kind of sides connect or these ideas. Anyone has ideas how to do that?
But I think the narrative is actually quite different. Like I mean, when you look at like the far right and like far right, like the narratives, like I don't think I've ever come across anything around love. there's like the idea of the nuclear family that's very much protected, you know, like we are doing this for our family. There's sometimes something about community, who belongs in this community or not, which, I mean, you can end this according to certain values, right? Like you were talking about like solidarity and like localized struggle according to certain frames of horizontalism, cooperation, mutual aid. And maybe if you define certain values, like how you mean, what you mean under love, if it's a social contract or if it's a personalized like belonging that belongs to one person, I think then the narratives change.
Yeah, what I'm asking is if it is a matter of contents or not, and there is some kind of a structure that is similar, because actually they talk about love, but the love to a nation, the love to the traditional family, the freedom about the freedom. They are now the people who talk more about freedom is Donald Trump or Diaz Ayuso. They are actually fighting for freedom, and they are positioning us as those who are oppressing them. So I used to be free to teach my child about life, and now you guys, the woke people, are just messing around and converting my children into gay people, you know, or trans, something like that. That's what Elon Musk said, which actually kind of. So I'm saying that what is not universal but general in the two blocks, if we can talk about two homogeneous blocks, and what is just a matter of context, in which just they love the things they love, but they also fight because they love, and they also act in this way because they hate things, and they use rage, and they use.
No, I mean, this is a whole, like another very interesting topic to just read about it too, like the idea of freedom. In a way, it's similar to liberation, but I try not to use freedom because it's been instrumentalized so much by these fascist movements, and like it's become such a term that's been thrown around. Like, what does it mean in the end? Like, everyone's just individual freedom, freedom of a nation. What does it mean anymore?
I mean, almost would be, I mean, I think if I look back, I would have preferred to study a far-right movement. I think I think it's much more useful, right? And like actually this question of like, because I mean, from our perspective, if we identify as like left, of course, it's very nice to study a leftist movement, but how they arrive at this point of love for the nation, freedom for the nation is actually what's politically more interesting to me right now, more interesting in the sense of, like, what do we then also do with this information, right?
I had a similar feeling right now. Because I was like, I feel very comfortable with this, but should I? Revolutionary love. But is there another kind of understanding revolutionary love that is actually enforced around and is actually having some political outcome?
Reactionary love, no?
Really?
No.
I don't know. I think they use the revolution against the war, against
Reactionary
the
love, no, revolutionary.
They also have an elite in their minds that they have to fight against and feel oppressed.
They are using to conquer.
Sorry.
They are using to conquer. They are conquering.
We used to say when the 15M, the 15M movement, I don't know if you're familiar with it, we used to say we want to reconquer democracy as if we were more democratic in the past. Or record the control over political matters. I don't know. It's like we all have like some kind of, I don't know. Maybe I'm twisting to so much.
Yeah, I don't know. I will have to see how, like, if I should have a whole chapter on this, or if it's better just not, because in the end, what I do want to look at is these bonds that we have, because I still see a lot of significance in this and really highlighting these bonds, because some movements that I was active in, they are always very strategic and really not some perspective of emotions. It's not really there. So I do still think there's some significance in it. Yeah, I'll see.
It's a question we've got there, actually. No, because I was gonna ask about like, okay, I'll ask it when the thing is to like, how did you perceive the change in it's gonna sound really hippie, the spirit of your comrades who went from this hyper strategic, disciplined way of deciding what to do and how to manage situations, social movements, to in a scenario where activists and comrades decide to say, hey, let's take care of each other, we don't have to keep on pushing ourselves. Did you see a change in that, or?
Well, for me, it was two different movements. That's why, like the first movement I was in, I did really align with their political ideas and values, and I was very comfortable there, and it like politicized me. But at some point, I felt kind of, yeah, there was something missing. And then the next movement I was in, maybe also because it was more feminist, kind of centered movement and internationalist movement. From the beginning, it was like very centered about like trying to see each other and have these songs. And for the first time, I felt something like that, maybe it's really strong emotions towards each other. And then I just comparing these two made me want to look into it more. Yeah.
Well, I think that you will be with us for a few days more, no? So I think that's many other conversation can be done on a coffee. Yeah, I really enjoy it. So despite the fact that somebody stole my question, I think there's one really strong underlying idea, I think, which is the importance of emotion in mobilizing people, no? The fact that many of us, especially in natural science, working on climate change, are failing to convince people about the reality of climate change by using numbers. No? And so it's not just a fault of the economist. So it's also likely that we are unable to transfer and give this sense of urgency. It should really appeal to the emotion, no? And I feel it when I like going on the sea and fishing. So when I see that the environment is, I see it with my eyes, no? I see the decline of mussels and clams in Galicia, and this is like really like, for me, it's like painful. And it is not the same kind of feeling that I feel when I read a report on the climate change and say, okay, the temperature is going to decrease, or that it's not the same. And I think this is a very, very powerful message. And but this is something we already know. Okay, well, some people working on this feeling and climate change already know. But still, I think that's I don't know. I think it's a message that is not very clear in the field of, in this case, of climate change, but also what you are showing, no? So the fact that simply the number of the kids killed in Palestine is not enough to cause like a reaction, right? Just feeling that just number. So
Is there time for an answer?
we
Wow,
are
okay.
totally free. There is no
Just
constraint.
curiosity.
We love you. No, I love you. So I give you the total freedom to speak.
Wow, this was useful already. Okay. Okay. Love you, both. Love you too. And then I do my question. No, I'm curious because for sure you know Gibson Graham, no? But is there any presence of Gibson Graham in your work, or you decided not to use it, and why didn't you use it? So I can see some connection, no? Like building from our interdependencies, we build our affections, we reorganize and stuff. I don't know. You decided to do rule it up?
No, it was not an active. I read it in the past, but for this, I haven't thought about it yet. But it's a good reminder. I should. If you have any specific.
Post-capitalist politics. I think that
Yeah, I should go back to it.
If we are in that phase of recommending that I was trying to not to do.
now, first you have to declare your love to someone.
That's the point of having the seminar that you,
Okay.
especially she's in the second year of PhD, so we can recommend things.
Well, is this book called Writing About My Past Goals, Writing with Depression, Activist Dysphoria?
This
by,
is the title.
Yeah, by Mark Fisher. And he coins this term activist dysphoria, and he talks like phenomenologically about how sadness is an intersubjectivity that describe our zeitgeist in the current age. And he then says that we should mobilize this commonality. He goes the opposite way. He doesn't argue about like underlying love. He argues underlying dysphoria. Like that's the thing that common to all of us is the underlying dysphoria. So that's the like. But I guess it would be interesting to read it because book is like doing an autoethnography, a cultural analysis of the situation and sort of things about like his feelings and then
Spoiler, he killed himself.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Suggestion. I mean,
Yeah, perfect.
I did kind of try to find some hopeful ideas.
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
like,
sorry. Yeah.
how no. No, but
Wrong spot.
That was not there.
no, but it's like I said too, it's just a reality that even if you do revolutionary love, most people are still depressed. So like something is very wrong.
Yeah, that's his
here.
point.
And I mean, I tried to find some ideas how we can contact like capitalist realism and things, but actually I want to, it's important to also see why we feel like this and the potentialities shown to act from this feeling of obsession.
I will continue if you allow me. But is there anything that in the literature you manage similar to window of opportunity? Because I have read some articles on that emotions have like some time span, lifespan, and if you don't undertake changes like in the structure of society using those emotions, at some point those emotions fade. So is there anything like that, like also like emotional cycles and
Yeah, I wrote about, for example, the burnout by Hannah Proctor, about political defeat and also like historically how people have dealt with this political defeat and different emotional oppressions and anxiety and so on. That's a good point. I mean, I don't see emotions as like a limited resource and you have to act at like one point, but it's of course like how when there's more and more defeat, how we keep our capacities. Yeah, I think it's mostly this book. When you look into it more, it's interesting.
I was thinking about whether you have looked into performative emotions, like emotion as performance, not as a feeling. And like there is work on this idea that we are expected to show. Like I think you make the difference between the psychological take on emotions as individual feelings, sociological one as structures of feeling. And that is good, but I think there is another category that you might want to explore, which is the difference between feeling something, really feeling something, or performing the feeling in public. There's a lot of work on that, like from
like, I don't know, funerals where people use, here in Spain, in other parts of the world, people used to pay women to go and cry in the funeral. It was part of the ritual. And you can see, like, you know, the performative side of emotions. And you can look into Goffman, for example, as you know, how we role play. And in certain contexts, we are expected to display certain feelings, not because we really feel them necessarily. So I suppose for me, the question is, when you talk about emotions, do you talk about something which is inner, like that is something that is connected to something that you feel inside? Or is it something like that you have to, or you show, you display in public with a purpose? Like all performative categories are performed with a strategic purpose, which is to cause some kind of effect.
Yeah. A very good thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how Extinction Rebellion used their grieving circus or public like staged funerals for like the earth or something. Like, yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, like train dead babies or something. I mean, I do have my problems with these kind of things, like forcefully trying to create a reaction. But no, it's a good point. Of course, it's always interconnected, the strategic thinking and the actual feelings that we feel.
And I think there is an extra layer of complexity, which is the social construction of these practices historically, no? And the fact that some emotion is like can be like socially, historically constructed. Look at them, for example, maternity. That the women are supposed to love their kids, and if they don't do that, it's like they are bad mothers, right? And that's how patriarchal system like constructs the idea of modernity around love, and sometimes, you know, because of that violence, or because you realize that you don't want to be a mother. I'm reading a novel, and it's about this. That's there's a movie, on this. So the fact that during Roman times was like it's perfectly normal to see people like killed in shows and stuff, and this was like there was no empathy, and how we constructed the idea of looking somebody suffering is something that make us suffering as well. Can be like somehow socially constructed. Yeah. So. So there are multiple levels of complexity that if you start digging into the idea of emotion and how we use love as a revolutionary tool.
I think it's worth engaging as well, because I mean, you made some references to like how other collectives feel, like, you know, and in the performative and rhetorical perspective on emotions, there is a lot of work on how we, again, ascribe emotions to others, or remove from others the ability to experience emotions. It's very common to call someone a psychopath when you want to discredit this person. Like, you know, it's like, and say this person cannot feel, or it's a way of dehumanizing as well. Like, you know, like the first thing that you do when a particular collective is being dehumanized is to ascribe them an inability to experience human emotions, like the emotions that make us human, empathy, or inability to experience, like grief. So I think, again, like it might be also when you discuss your research, to what extent are you also engaging in this, you know, performative and rhetorical construction of the other as an emotional or unemotional other? And it might be something to do when you write, like the reflexive side of your PhD, being aware of these things, because, you know, it's something, again, very, very common, like to ascribe certain emotions to others, to remove certain emotions from others as a way of dehumanizing, or basically saying this collective is less human.
It's clear with the Palestinians.
Even with animals.
Yeah, this connects to the anthropocentric.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, very helpful. Thanks.
Okay, but you are more than welcome to come at the end of your PhD and show us your results if you like. And so please.